Exploring the bizarre. Your e-ticket ride into the world of the paranormal. Strap yourself in as we traverse the universe exploring the unexplained. UFOs, ghosts, lost worlds, cryptozoology, as well as other dimensions. It's time to take back the night. Now, your electrifying hosts of Exploring the Bizarre, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Well, you know, I did have quite a hangover last night. I don't know how much, Tim. I don't know how much further I can drag this ball and chain here. I'm looking for the exit for Asylum 49, but I can't seem to find it. I think we're trapped in here with the owner of this haunted attraction and the author of a new book that's just come out. And so tonight we're going to have a very spooky show. I know it's a little bit before Halloween, a little bit before Halloween, but I certainly did want to come out of the closet and show our true colors because, Tim, I know you and I both love this time of year when the pumpkins grow big and there's mist on the lawn. And the cat doesn't want to go out at night, that kind of stuff, man.
That's right. And there's ghostlies and ghoulies and long-legged boolies.
Yeah, and they're all camped out at my apartment here.
I'm not there.
Well, that's true. That's true. But we'll save you a space on the invisible couch.
Thank you.
And for tonight, I guess we have a pretty versatile show. Because not only are we going to talk about haunted asylums and spooks and ghosts and spirits and EVPs, but also too we want to find out something about haunts. Do you know what a haunt is, Tim?
Oh yeah, well in my neck of the woods, and this is a little bit more of a southern things, but it managed to creep up here to Indiana. People would refer to them as haints.
Haints.
Haints. Haints. Haints. And that would be like a
like hate misbehaving.
Yeah, exactly. It's just kind of a slang of haunt, but it'd have to do with what we're talking about tonight. Somebody would say that they have a haint in their house, or that the cemetery across the street had a haint, and that usually meant that they had ghostly activity, that sort of thing.
Well, now these are what we're, I guess, referring here, though, at the moment, are commercial haints. These are the ones where people pluck down their doubloons outside the haunt and enter inside and are immediately attacked by zombies, ghouls, and guys that stepped right out of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Oh yeah, always popular around here. Starting around Halloween, spook houses.
Oh, spook houses, yeah.
Haunted train rides.
Well, now that was the haunted ghost trains came. I guess they were the originators, or it came a little bit before the haunts of today. The ghost trains were big, I believe, in the 1940s and 1950s, and were more or less associated with carnivals and traveling roadshow attractions.
Oh yeah, well, they continued on into like the 60s and even the early 70s, because I'm not that old, but I remember as a kid going to carnivals, traveling carnivals and stuff, and riding these the ghost trains,
old rickety trains.
Right.
Now I was on one. I don't know how many years ago, but within 10 years with my associate Carol, we go maybe once a year to Coney Island, and they still have the the amusements there. Some of them have fallen somewhat on hard times. Now, Coney Island, of course, also has two freak shows. In fact, one of our friends, Zamora the Torture King,
Mhm.
I've seen him perform there. You know, he eats glass and stomps on beer bottles and holds electric bulbs in his mouth and all sorts of um,
All
freakish
sort
type
all
things.
sorts
Yeah.
of fun things.
Oh yeah, the things that we just like to crowd around here on a weekend and do.
That's right.
And anyway, so Carol and I we saw this old ride. You get in a little car, you know, and then the person up front pushes the car, and you go along the tracks. Well, I don't know when this amusement ride was put up at Coney Island, but it was about the ricketiest ride that I have ever been on. Certainly of this type, where the monsters would only half come out of the wall, and the paper mache was kind of falling apart. I think too many kids had punched them maybe or something along the ride, and you wonder if you'll ever make it to the exit. Oh, and worst of all, it can't be very spooky because the sunlight is coming in from beneath the or around the cracks in the floor of the boards. So I would not put this up on the a high level of strangeness. But
I remember one when I was a kid. It had like the flashing strobe lights, in it, so you could catch a glimpse of things as you were traveling along in the car. And at one point, you could see up ahead there were like arms
yes,
sticking out of the wall, just right at head level. And of course, then the lights went out, and you ended up getting smacked in the face about half a dozen times as the car traveled along its
well,
tracks.
if somebody wanted to update that, we would change the marquee outside and make it an alien abduction ride.
Ooh, there you go.
There you go. Isn't always have a commercial idea in mind.
That's right.
But tonight we have two very special guests. We have Cami Anderson. Is that how you pronounce your first name?
It is.
Cami Anderson, and she is the owner of a haunt in Utah. Right? What town are you located in?
Right. We're in Tooele, Utah, just outside Salt Lake City, about 40 minutes.
Hmm. And you are next to a graveyard.
We are.
Well, one hardly knows where to begin. Now, as I understand it from the book that I have here in front of me, Asylum 49, The Haunting of Asylum 49, that just came out a couple of weeks ago by New Page Publishing, very good
Hmm.
publisher of all this type of literature. I know they put out some books by our good friend Nick Redford and so forth. Apparently, you have an intermingling of zombies and real, honest to goodness ghoulies and ghosts and real things that go bump in the night.
Yes, we do. We have quite a good variety of all of that.
And how did you? I mean, why did you decide it? Okay, some people make their living doing this. I understand that there are about 2,500 haunts now in the United States, attractions that usually open around Halloween. In fact, we have one or two of them here in New York, and I know I've went once or twice, and they attract a very good size crowd. In fact, I think last year alone, something like 14 million people went to a haunt, to a entertainment type place. But when did you decide to buy the place? How first of all, how long have you owned the?
Well, we have been in business. This will be
Yeah.
our 11th season,
Uh
but
huh.
we've owned it for about 3 years.
Yes. Okay. But it was a legitimate asylum. Is that correct?
It was the community hospital here in Tooele,
Mm.
um, back from starting in 1953 until about 2003. And then it was closed down as the hospital due to growing population and needs to update the hospital. So they built a new one, and then a nursing home moved in on a large portion of the hospital.
Hmm. And when you bought the place, I mean, did you buy it because it was loaded with ghost, or did you buy it? Well, I guess you did buy it because you said you had been working there. You knew at the time that it had real ghosts and spirits, along with the people that you hired to spook out the public.
Yeah, we did know when we bought the place. However, we didn't know when we first started leasing the location. In fact, my husband Kim, he's the one who began the haunted house. He has been working in the haunt industry for years and years, ever since he was a teenager. And he always told himself if he ever had the opportunity to start up a haunted house, he would do that. And he was a huge skeptic when he first started. I married into the gig, so I kind of lucked out. But in my views, not everybody would see that as lucky. But so he was a huge skeptic, and along with Dusty and Lyle and Sonia, sister-in-law, and niece and nephew, he started the haunted house. And they had all kind of occurrences going on where they would hear voices right in their ears on 6-foot ladders, or their tools would be moved clear across the room and sometimes clear onto the other side of the hospital. Um, Doors opening and closing, footsteps when nobody else was in the building. Even Kim had his pants tugged by a ghostly unseen visitor. So for a long time, they didn't want to say anything to anybody or tell anybody any of the things that they were experiencing because they didn't want to seem crazy. But they came to a point they couldn't keep it a secret anymore.
Well, now, just so people don't think that this is a come on to attract people just to the haunt, you actually have a gentleman who's also on with us tonight, Richard Estep, who has written a book about the actual phenomena that goes on there, and his background is that of a paranormal researcher. Richard, why don't you just give us a little details about how you got involved with Asylum 49 and what your background is as far as a paranormal researcher goes?
Certainly. Well, I've been a paranormal investigator for the past 20 years on both sides of the Atlantic, operating in the United Kingdom and then here in the United States. And I still get across the pond at least once or twice a year to investigate some British cases. And so I had written a book called The World's Most Haunted Hospitals, or I should say that I was working on that book. And I'd heard about Asylum 49, and I contacted the owners, the Andersons, and their friends and colleagues, and they invited me to go see what was what. So rather than try and sell me on anything, they said, come and see for yourself. So I did. I took a couple of my fellow investigators with me, a guy called Jason Fellon and Sean Rice, and we drove the 1,000-mile door-to-door trip from Colorado to go spend a night in the asylum. And it was pretty quiet, to tell you the truth. But I went through the archive while I was there of the EVPs and the photographs and the video footage that they'd been capturing over the years, and I was pretty impressed. So when I told them that I hadn't gotten any results that night, they said, well, the problem is you came off season. It's the spring. You need to come back when we're at our peak. You need to come back at Halloween because we have over 30,000 people coming through the asylum. And that energy brings out the real ghosts. It brings out the real spirits. It gives them the means to manifest. And so I agreed to go back the Halloween of that same year and move into the asylum for a week with a team of paramedics, nurses, paranormal investigators to try and get to the bottom of what was going on.
And so when you were staying there at the hospital, I mean, did you experience anything during off hours? You know, like when you were just in there by yourself, there wasn't any people going through the spook house or anything like that.
Oh, did I ever? I mean, if you're going to control the environment, if it's going to be meaningful, you need to know that there aren't just people randomly wandering through. So we were given carte blanche to lock the whole place up and make sure we were the only people in it. And plus it helps that the entire place is rigged with CCTV cameras. So it's the in-house security system that they use to make sure the haunt is safe and secure. So I had all that going for me before I set up a single camera of my own or did any experiments.
So now, what about the title, Asylum 49, Aggressive Spirits, Phantom Doctors, and the Secret of Room 666? So now, when you say aggressive spirits, I mean, are there aggressive spirits there?
Well, one of them scratched one of my investigators, so that meets my definition for aggressive, pretty much. So yeah, definitely there are.
Huh. So I've seen a lot of instances, over the last 10 years or so of spirit scratches and things like that. I mean, in your and this is a speculation. How can that happen? I mean, if we're talking about something that is no longer a part of this world, if we consider spirits to be of people who have passed on, how are they able to do things that manifest in our physical reality?
Well, that's a great question, and we also have to answer the question: how can they open doors? How can they throw objects? How can they interact with the physical environment in any way? And really, it has to involve some means of manipulating energy and matter that we don't quite understand yet.
Well, Cami, where did you come up with? Where did the name Asylum 49 come from this book?
Well, Asylum is the name of our local haunted house attraction, and Asylum 49. And asylum is just kind of a creepy word, It's got multiple meanings, but it generally is a creepy and frightening word. And 49 came from when they began construction on the hospital, which was in 1949.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, now, when your husband and his crew first started working in the place after you bought it, I mean, before any of the spook house started or anything like that, well, while they were doing repairs and getting things ready, is that when the activity first started for them?
For them, it did. In fact, nobody had really stepped foot into the hospital except Kim when he was doing the initial tour to see if he wanted to lease the building. Mm-hmm. And that's when they first started encountering it. And after they realized that it wasn't just their imagination and they couldn't explain things away any longer, they decided to bring in a paranormal team in Utah that did their own investigation. And they came away and showed them about some of the things that you do during a paranormal investigation and explained to them some of the type of evidence you can get and what they are. And they actually ended up getting quite a few EVPs.
Well, the reason I ask that question is because a lot of times you'll have, say, like an old house or an old building like that, even though people have been in and out of it, they haven't reported any kind of paranormal activity. But once you start trying to do repairs, change things, that seems to get, whatever astral entities are in there riled up.
Right. And that is probably something that does happen. I would say that we do have a jump in activity when we do that stuff, but nobody knew about it being haunted until after we knew.
Do you think there's a possibility that the spirits think that they're under attack when they see the people, the actors and all that have been hired to be part of the attraction?
No, they don't. They're actually, I don't know if they did in the beginning, but now they're pretty knowledgeable about what we do, and some even participate.
Oh my goodness!
So now you've had go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, well, no, I was going to say, well, how exactly do they participate?
Oh my goodness! So I've actually witnessed a little girl that's been in the hallway by the name of Sarah, and she's been one of our resident ghosts that's very communicative since the beginning. I've seen her during the haunt season, and I've seen her during ghost hunts, as well as Kim and many other people who have seen her. And a lot of the claims that a little girl that matches her description will grab people by the hands and say, "I've lost my mommy," and lead them through a maze into a dead end, and then all of a sudden she's gone, and things like that.
So then, on top of the haunted house, Halloween shows that you do you also do, well, like you said, like a ghost hunt, like a ghost tour, so to speak?
We do. There's been a lot of interest in the other side, throughout centuries, and of course, with the rise in the paranormal TV shows, interest has been piqued. And so we do have quite a few teams that come in and investigate the location, along with people who are just curious about learning more and doing what they see on the TV. So we provide a nice, safe place for people to go and discover things on their own.
Well,
Now,
I could see, during off peak times,
Mhm.
not just October, but other times of the year where I mean, you actually could give tours
Yes.
just for the public, in the place, and talk about its history, and maybe hope that that they could see a ghost.
Yes, and it's pretty common that if they don't see a ghost, which is actually very rare, they do see some shadow figures, and they also get EVPs, and there's been pictures. And it's not just active during the haunted house season.
Hmm.
That's just when the most impressive and most, I guess, insane personal experiences happen.
how many different spirits are you dealing with there?
We've got quite a few that are there regularly. I'd say about 15 of them.
And do
Um,
you have names for them?
We do have names for them. We have kids, and the kids go by Sarah and Tabitha and Thomas and Jessica and Christian. However, I have been told, and we have had some communications with other children that don't necessarily give their names out, or they just don't want to communicate as much. But we also have adults there that are older, and some elderly adult ghosts, and all kind of things.
Now, how many of them were actually, um, would you say, related to the asylum? I mean, were most of them there as patients, or some of them worked there as on the staff?
Yes, we actually have some that were patients, some that had lived and died there. We have been able to find them in history through family members. After we had done investigations and said, this is who we have found to be in this room, and they say, oh my goodness, that's my grandpa or my great grandpa, or twice removed, or something like that. Or we actually have been given first and last names of one particular spirit, which his name is Peter. And he's an x-ray technician that we've been able to find in history also as having worked there. And also we've talked with his family members as well.
And do they agree that there's a good chance that this is his spirit?
Yes, in fact, we've given them the opportunity to listen to EVPs and see if they can recognize the voice. And they've said, yes, that's definitely the voice.
Well, now, okay. Well, we're coming up for a break here in just a couple of seconds, but I don't know. I'm just curious. Why would the spirits want to hang, around there? So we'll be back in just a few minutes after our break, and with some more haunted attractions and exploring the bizarre.
Now back to exploring the bizarre with two of the most electrifying researchers in the paranormal. Your hosts, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
There's somebody breathing down my neck here, but I just turned around, and there's nobody. There's nobody here. My goodness, they won't go away. Huh. I hope she's young and beautiful. Huh? We'll put her in a Mr. Creepo movie, right? So, anyway, we're back, and we're talking about haunted asylums, spook attractions, Halloween, and things that are unearthly in origin. Now, I think you mentioned, Richard, you had EVPs. Did you take them make them right there in the house? I mean, record them?
Yeah, we did, and they'd already gotten quite a few themselves beforehand. In fact, they had literally hundreds of EVPs before I ever got there.
And what I mean? Is there some commonality in the EVPs?
Well, generally they're interactive. You can ask questions and receive meaningful answers from some of these EVPs, which is pretty fascinating.
That's unique.
Yeah.
And what sort of questions have you asked and gotten meaningful answers to?
Well, one good example was that when a bunch of investigators, 5 or 6 of us, were clustered in the corridor outside room 6, or room 666 as it's now called, we were asking, who is here? Can you name the people that are here? And certainly my name was called out, and the names of other investigators were called out through a spirit box. I don't know if you're familiar with that device.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
yep.
Is that the one that scans the radio frequencies?
It is. It basically hops through frequencies, and the
Mhm.
theory is that some spirits can kind of piggyback in on the white noise between frequencies. And so we were getting that. We were getting some interactions that were a little disturbing, and certainly as the evening wore on, they took a turn for the more aggressive.
Now, how often do the voices, like if you set up shop this evening, started asking questions, would you get responses?
Well, there are never any guarantees, but I think that we had responses most nights, and I'll let Cami answer that because she practically lives in the asylum.
We do, especially right now. We're getting all ready for the haunted house season. But yeah, you're pretty likely to get some sort of activity if you have if you were to go in there right now.
There they are now.
Yeah, there they are now. They're calling.
That's a real EVP.
That's a real EVP. It's not even a joke here. But no, you're pretty likely to get an EVP or a picture or have some sort of personal experience pretty much every time you go in there. And I'm not going to say that that's 100%, but they're very active and they like to communicate with other people.
Well, what kind of recorders do you use in the in the process of getting the EVPs?
Pretty much any kind has caught in something. RCAs, the Olympus. We've used the 360s. I mean, pretty much anything you can get them.
And these are all digital recorders.
Yes, digital recorders. We've also got reel-to-reel conversations and regular tape recorders. We've tried it all.
Now Richard and Cami. I mean, you both referred to room 6. What sets this room off over all the rest?
Well, one of the cool things about room 6 is not the activity within it, but the activity that you can see on the outside of it. And we've discovered that we can get them to pretty much come out and show themselves. And the way we do that is at the end of the hall, it's the maternity hall, and at the end of the hall, there's a doorway that has brushed aluminum around the outside of the doorway. And if you shine a very dim light down the hallway, just barely enough that will illuminate off of the aluminum, you can say, okay, can you please come out and walk across the hall? And pretty much 99% of the time, you'll watch a spirit walk across the hall. You can see head, shoulders, legs, arms. And that's pretty unique.
And has this been captured on video?
It has.
And is there any place that our listeners can see this?
It's not quite on our website just yet. That's a fairly new one. But if you were to go, when we put it up, you can go to asylum49.com and you can see that. And I think Richard, he might be putting some up on his website as well.
That's right.
Yeah, there was a very good, actually, I was over to your website earlier this evening, and there was a very good introductory video about the haunt, which I think people would enjoy watching. Now, have any of the people that you have hired as part of the zombie madness, let's call it, have they ever been freaked out by the real spooks and decided not to come back and work?
There's been some times when there's been some kids frightened and some adults that have been scratched and things like that, but they've always come back. And we try to be very, very cautious and observant of our surroundings and what's going on there. But yeah, there's been times when people have been frightened. One of those times was a girl that was in one of the patient beds, and she was playing a part as a patient. And it was kind of late at night. She was a little bit tired, and she started to nod off. And when she woke up and opened her eyes, she looked up and saw a doctor standing over her, observing her on the bed as if she were a patient.
Now, have you seen any kind of a rhyme or reason when it comes to physical activity or interactions, I should say, when it comes to scratches or touches or anything like that? I mean, people who've been scratched, have they, like come in, like more with a skeptical attitude or making fun of the situation, or does it just, these things just seem to happen at random?
Generally, it's with provocation. At times, maybe you'll just catch somebody on a bad day. Like in the case of the one that Richard had experienced, she was scratched. And I don't believe there was provocation going on, but Wesley is the spirit that lived and died in that room. And when he was alive, he had Alzheimer's. And apparently he passed. And when he passed, it came with him. So they could have just caught him on a bad day and he got angry. And if anybody knows anything about the disease, they can become quite violent.
Well, now that's a disturbing thought.
It is.
To think that you could die with some kind of physical ailment and carry it with you to the
Yeah.
afterlife.
Yeah, it is. And we've often wondered about that, how he kept that when he passed. But the only thing we can come up with is the other side probably knows best, and there's got to be a reason for it.
Well, and that brings into the whole question on why these people are still there. I mean, and of course, like I said before, this is all just speculation, because I mean, you always hear about the people who've come back, after a near-death experience, and said that a lot of times, there was relatives waiting to carry them on, and it's just like, what happened to these people? Did they take a wrong turn someplace?
Now,
Yeah.
I understand also that you have a room that you've nicknamed the fear cage, that's loaded with dolls.
Yes, we do. We actually have a room, and we call it the fear cage because there's a very large power source going through there, and it's the main power line for the whole hospital. And it creates this kind of cage. It actually can trace it with an EMF device, and it arches kind of like one of those old school bird cages.
And how are the dolls I mean, do the dolls have a reputation for being haunted themselves?
I wouldn't know if any of them are haunted. I wouldn't be surprised. We have some antique dolls in there, but right now it's just set up as the haunted house room, and a lot of people are terrified of dolls, and probably because there are some that have been possessed.
Yeah.
They just look creepy.
They do.
The next thing you'll tell us is that you're going to establish a clown room.
We have it.
Oh, you do.
We do.
Well, clowns seem to be on the loose the last week or two. Isn't that right, Tim? They've been accosting people at night on the highway and.
Oh yeah. There's been a number of cases all across the country of kids saying that clowns have been trying to get them to go into the woods with them, or standing on dark street corners waving at cars
and well, let's see. During my career, I met Emmett Kelly Jr.
Mm-hmm.
He was a fairly nice clown. In fact, he was interested in the UFOs and had witnessed the Brown Mountain Lights down in North Carolina. And then I also, when I was young, had a photo of Bozo, which I guess is a generic clown. I mean, you can't kind of copyright the name. And you know what I found out is a lot of these names and the characters themselves were taken from North American Indian lore.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That the various tribes had, and they were, some of their clowns were kind of a sinister nature, and some of them were shamans and went into trance and so forth. So there is a history of clowns and the diabolical. Richard, have you found that to be the case? Any research into clowns as spirits?
Well, certainly there is the very famous haunted clown motel in New Mexico.
No way.
Uh,
Tell us about that.
it's not somewhere that I've visited. It's on my bucket list, but quite memorably, if you watch the TV show Ghost Adventures, the lead for that show is absolutely terrified of clowns. And so this is a motel that is entirely kitted out, decked out with clowns. Clowns in every room, clown themed. It looks absolutely terrifying. And it has one real thing in common with Asylum 49, and that is that it is also built next to the town cemetery.
Do you think, though, that there is any connection, though, between a haunted location and a cemetery? Because I know that, in a lot of my research, a cemetery tends to be the least haunted location in an area.
You kind of wonder if you don't get some, not resident spirits, but some drop-ins, some that have recently moved on. I kind of think a location like Asylum 49, to spirits at least, acts like a lighthouse. It's this big beacon of usable energy, because if you imagine 30,000 plus people coming through with the intent of being scared, and if you imagine that they're all thinking about ghosts and spirits, which is exactly what goes on each Halloween at that location, that's going to attract, I think, resident spirits like moths to a flame.
Oh, yeah, it's like a spotlight in the astral plane.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, we do have our favorite haunted cemetery. We have a friend of the show, Claudia Cunningham. We call her the MIB lady. She lives up near Albany, New York. And in fact, on our YouTube channel, Mr. UFO's Secret Files, we visit the cemetery together where Charles Fort is buried. Charles Fort, of course, being one of the originators, investigators, and writers on all things odd and unusual and unexplainable. He wrote 4 massive books, I guess around 1900 to 1930. Well, he passed away in 1932, if I remember correctly, but he wrote like Wild Talents and Low and stories about people who disappeared. He was very big on vanishings, and of course the fall of substances from the sky. Anyway, Claudia has her own little paranormal group up there in Albany, and they often visit the rural cemetery. And there have been occasions where these devil hounds or phantom dogs have been seen, and they will actually prevent people from getting out of their vehicles. And there have been, of course, strange black Cadillacs driven by MIB types that will go down paths that actually are chained off, but they seem to actually go through the chains and vanish down the road. And when they pass you very close on the gravel road, you cannot hear the movement of the vehicle over the gravel, which of course should be very pronounced. So she is our resident paranormal type person, and it's in a cemetery, and there seems to be a history there of things that go, bump in the night. Literally, I guess one of the chief haunts is this couple that float over the gravestones at night in their pajamas, carrying a candle, dressed, as if they were headed to bed or something like that. Very, very, very strange. But they've been seen by a number of witnesses. And Chester Arthur is buried there, who is one of the least known American presidents. And I don't know if he's bringing in any more voters these days, but it certainly is a strange place, and it seems to attract. Its degree of spooks. And also we've noticed now that cemeteries also do seem to bring in the UFO phenomena, maybe even more so than ghosts. There's a town in New York here called Pine Bush, which for, I guess maybe up to a decade, was a hub of UFO activity where these objects were coming over, I won't say on a nightly basis, but certainly on a very frequent basis. And one of the places where people were going to have the best sightings was on the perimeter of the old Jewish cemetery. So there is something about cemeteries that seem to attract the bizarre, but it might not be what we think it is. I don't think they're necessarily coming back to visit their cousins. But Cami, what are some of the other rooms in the asylum?
Well, we have about 32 that we open up for the haunted house attraction. But there's quite a few as far as patient rooms and the hallways, and even the hallways have their own activity. But one of them that I can think of that Richard is very familiar with also is the mirror maze and the black plastic mazes. And that has a spirit by the name of the Guardian, who claims to be guarding secrets in it.
And what kind of secrets?
We don't know. He hasn't told us. He's
It's
guarding
a
them.
secret.
Yes, it's a
Well,
secret.
why don't you try rattling his chain and see if that you can shake the information out of him. Now, has anybody walked through one of these spirits? I mean, how do they actually do when they show themselves? Would you think that they were, an ordinary person at first before you realized that they were something a little bit stranger than that?
Sometimes you can see them just completely solid, like you and I. Sometimes they're shadows. Sometimes you don't see them at all, but you just feel that you walk through something.
I mean, have they ever approached anybody and said, I'm lost. Which way is the exit, or how do I get to the to the ER?
Yeah, just the kids. They haven't said anything about the ER, but they'll say, "I've lost my mom. Help me find my way," or
Oh,
"I'm lost." And
that's almost very sad.
it is. Some people are very sad by it, unless it's the spirit is actually trying to trip you up and frighten you or get you more lost in a maze, and they're just doing what they feel is their job in the haunted house attraction.
Now, do you think that, of course, this has been the debate in the paranormal for a long time. Do you think that they really are who they claim to be? I mean, are these the spirits of deceased, or could they be some a trickster element trying to pretend to be spirits, or demonic in nature?
I don't feel that we have anything demonic at the hospital, but we have seen some interesting things that are, some of them are big, some of them are small, um, and some just big masses of shadow form, I guess. But I think that some of them do tend to um, deceive people. And one of those is Jeremy. He actually was caught mimicking another spirit that we have named Robert.
No
And
way.
yeah, and I'm not really sure we
Well,
didn't.
you ought to pull on his bed sheet pretty hard next time.
Well, he doesn't stay in a bed. He likes to stay down a specific hallway, and we always know when he's near when we smell smoke.
Hmm. And you smell smoke.
You do. You smell smoke. Uh, we've smelled smoke for years and years, and we've chased it to try and put out the fire wherever it was. And come to find out, we had a spirit there. One of the mediums that we had come up said, "This is Jeremy," and he actually died in a fire.
Hmm. Had there been a fire in the asylum?
No, there was never a fire there, but it's completely possible that he was burned and he was taken to the hospital
Oh,
and
well, of
passed
course,
there.
yes. Uh-huh. And what of the actual staff? I mean, who of the staff of the asylum? Well, it's not really an asylum; it's a hospital. I mean, more than an asylum, right? I mean, we're not talking about loony bin type people, right? That are getting electric shock therapy or being put into tubs of ice.
Right. No, it was
Yeah.
a community hospital.
Hospital. Okay. All right. Yeah, all right. Yeah, we
No,
should
but
straighten
but
that out. Yeah.
a lot of times most hospitals, and I mean even today, would have a floor sectioned off for people like that. either for there for temporary treatment before they'd be sent on to someplace else. So yeah, it's that wouldn't be out of the ordinary that you would have patients who had mental disorders
I
stay in
would
that place.
I would
Yeah.
bet that the Hollywood version of the book, the producers will want to include something like that. In fact, I
I'm sure they would.
understand that in fact I understand the book is under option to be made into a movie.
It sure can be.
Yeah.
It was just filmed for TV
Yes,
for my
it
new
was.
TV series, which is called Haunted Case Files, that airs on Sunday nights on Destination America.
And that will be on this Sunday night?
No, it's episode, I believe, it's either 6 or 7. I want to say number 7.
Hmm.
So that should air October 30th.
Oh, well, isn't that just a prime time?
Very appropriate.
Yeah.
Well, now, have you had people, just the skeptical types just say, "Oh yeah, sure, the place is haunted. You're just trying to make more money, for your haunted house shows."
Well, and
Yes.
it's very easy to address. Come spend a night there. Let us lock you in.
Do you charge extra to be locked in? I mean, can people buy a night?
They sure can. They can go and see information on that on our website.
Ah, I got you. Very clever.
Well, I want to know though, have any skeptics taken them up on that? Because a lot of the skeptics and debunkers, I mean, yeah, they talk the big talk, but they fail to walk when the time comes.
Yeah, we've actually had some guests that have come in and their wife or their husbands or their friends have dragged them in and they were 100% positive that nothing would happen. And the second they see something that they can't explain, they get very, very frightened and leave. They've had some that have actually gone out and waited in the car for several hours while their other partner stays in ghost hunts.
Really?
Yeah.
And then it would be funny if whatever was going on followed them out into the parking lot.
That would be interesting.
Why do you think some people are more afraid of ghosts than others?
I think that they have been misled by Hollywood, by movies that are meant to entertain and frighten, and haven't really gone out and experienced it for themselves.
Well, we are going to take our mid-evening break, and we will be back shortly, and we will return to the Asylum 49 in the town of
Tooele,
Utah, with Cami and Richard.
Exploring the bizarre. Your e-ticket ride into the world of the paranormal. Strap yourself in as we traverse the universe exploring the unexplained. UFOs, ghosts, lost worlds, cryptozoology, as well as other dimensions. It's time to take back the night. Now, your electrifying hosts of Exploring the Bizarre, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Well, hey, Tim, is this our birthday? Is this our anniversary? Have we been on KCOR now for a year?
I don't know if this particular date is our anniversary, but yes, we have been on KCOR for a year now. Can you believe that?
Yes.
The time has gone by so fast.
We have had some of the most fascinating guests, humanly or inhumanly possible, in the world of the paranormal, UFOs, cryptozoology, because we actually go out and hunt for them. We're always looking for people who have not haven't broadcast their experiences before, who have something to say. And we've had some really exciting, entertaining, and knowledgeable individuals on. And we promise to continue with this pattern of doing shows. In fact, we've got some very interesting programs, Tim, coming up in the next couple of weeks. We have a couple who do spirit art. And spirit art has been something that's been around in the uh, spiritualist movement, although this couple are not spiritualists, for a long, long time,
Oh
where
yeah.
people could actually sit you at in a room without knowing anything about your background or your family, and can do a little bit of meditation, pick up a pencil or some sort of a paintbrush, and render the likeness of someone in your family or a loved one who has passed on to the other side. Now, some of the artwork that was done in the spiritualist communities around 1900 or so were very spectacular.
Oh
In fact,
yes.
they did not even there was a two sisters, the Bang sisters, and they did not even hold the brushes. Now they would put canvases down on the table with a couple of little things of paint and brushes nearby, and then within a short period of time, they would pick up the canvases, and there would be some very very elaborate paintings and portraits there, and the brushes. I don't think anybody actually saw the brushes move by themselves, but the paintings kept modifying and changing over a period of a couple of days
Hmm.
before they were actually solidified, and some of them hang up in the museums today in these various spiritualist encampments. One of them being in Indiana, I believe.
Camp Chesterfield. Yes.
Indeed, indeed. Then we have another lady who has worked for the space for NASA, who says that she has actually seen doctored photographs of UFOs, bases on the moon. We want to hear her story because, in fact, she says that one of the code words for UFOs among the astronauts was the use of the slang term Santa Claus. And you
Hmm.
know something? I know this is true
Yep.
because back in the early 1950s, I was on assignment from a leading magazine at the time, and I spent 3 or 4 days down in Washington, D.C., at the headquarters of NASA there, and I was permitted to go through every single transcript of every space voyage up until that time. And let me tell you, they were these documents, these transcripts were loaded with reports of UFOs, and on a couple of occasions, that's how the astronauts would describe what they saw. They would report to NASA, "Oh, here comes Santa Claus," and so I know that's a fact. So we've got to hear what this gal has to say about her employment in NASA and what they covered up. But I'm really excited about a guest. Let's just call him John for the time being. That we will have on September 29th. I met this gentleman, Tim, uh, in the late 1970s
Hmm.
while I was on a tour promoting my publications. And I was down in Florida, where it's good to go on a tour during the winter months. And I was introduced to this gentleman who had a health food store, holistic center. And he told me this very, very strange story about how he had come across a alien artifact. I mean, we're talking about something manufactured perhaps off world. I saw it. It's very unique. It's very strange. And I think that this is a program. I mean, this beats anything on Roswell and talk about alien bodies and things along that line. This is, as far as I'm concerned, as strange as it is, and that's why it's going to be on Exploring the Bizarre. I think that this is the real McCoy. I
Well, and
tried to
this
get
guy and this guy has never
yeah.
been on any other program.
No, in fact, as far as I know, uh, at the time that I met him, it was maybe a year or two after Close Encounters, the movie, had been released, right? And he knew the owner of the local theater there that was going to premiere the film. And he showed this artifact to the manager of the theater, and told him under what circumstances that he discovered the artifact while he was in California. At first, the owner of the theater, the manager, was very enthusiastic about displaying this item in the lobby of a theater because he thought it would be a terrific tie-in to get people into the theater to see the Steve Spielberg movie. At the last minute, he canceled the idea. He said, well, he thought people might be frightened of it. He wasn't sure if it was a family, family entertainment or what he wanted to present to his audience. So he canceled the presentation. The item was also showed, as if I remember correctly, two members of NASA who were going to get back to him, and of course, they came back with a story that did not match the object that they were in a position to examine. So I tried to search for John for almost 30 years. And finally, he signed up for Facebook.
Thank heavens for Facebook.
Yeah. And there's only two people in the whole world that I have tried to find, and I can't find them on Facebook. So maybe they've changed their name or something like that, or gotten married, or who knows what. But on September 29th, we will have the ride of our career. And I think it's going to be a great show, and I would suggest that all our regular listeners tell their friends, because it will be a night to remember, and perhaps will bring us closer to the solution to the flying saucer mystery. Though I can't guarantee that, because I would have thought by this time, after 50 years of huffing and puffing and chasing strange objects in the sky, I would know something more than I do now. But we don't, and that's where it is. So, Tim, why don't you reintroduce our guest for the evening, and we will carry on the conversation. I do want to ask Richard about EVPs. I'm always very fascinated with that.
Well, yeah. Tonight we're talking with Richard Estep. Am I saying that right?
You are.
All right, Richard Estep and Cami Anderson. They are the authors of the book Asylum 49. And so we're talking about ghosts and hauntings and EVPs. So, Richard, Tim, let me ask Richard real quick here.
Yes.
Before you ask a question about EVP. Richard, I'm just a little bit, I'm just curious about your background. And I mean, were you interested in the paranormal when you were a kid? Did you have your own experiences? What got you started in all this?
I was interested since I was a very young boy. And if anyone wants the full details, I wrote about my autobiography, In Search of the Paranormal, which Llewellyn brought out last year. But the short version is I grew up in a haunted house. My grandparents had a haunted house, and I heard these hair-raising stories from all of my uncles and aunts about the old lady that haunted this house and would tuck the children into bed at night when they were kids. And so I was fascinated and kind of terrified that I might run into this old lady. But what had happened was that when they'd all gone their separate ways, because, it was one of these big, my grandparents were the World War II generation, so they had a big family. And when all of the kids grew up and moved out and had kids of their own, the haunting stopped. The house just stopped being so active, as if somebody had thrown a light switch. And my theory is it was because all of the energy, or so much of it, had gone and had moved out. So I remained passionate about it. I read every book on the library shelves, because there were no TV shows back then that you could watch as there are today. And then finally in 1995, I took the plunge. I hooked up with a local team and began to learn the art of paranormal investigation.
All right. Well, Tim, do you want to ask your question
Well,
about
how did okay, you were born and raised in England, you were?
Yes.
And when did you well, how much of your life did you spend over there, and when did you move to the States here?
So I moved to the States in 1999, which when I was 26. So I spent the first 4 years or so of my career exclusively in the UK, and then when I came to the States, I investigated here, and now I do both sides of the pond.
And now, I knew actually many, many years ago, I met the fellow, I guess he was one of the originators of the EVP. His name was Stuart Robb. Now, Stuart was a frequent guest on the Long John Neville show. Long John was the originator of the paranormal all-night radio format. And they would take out just a regular a tape recorder. In those days, they had a big reel-to-reel devices, and they would turn on the tape recorder. And when they played the tape, they tried to have silence in the room. It wasn't so elaborate now as asking questions and all. Although they did bring it to that point eventually, and they started getting whispers and sounds and what appeared to be voices. And of course, Stewart was sort of ridiculed by a lot of people and said, "Oh, this is just background sound and other people in the room, and the TV set or the radio on somewhere else in the house, and what have you." But as they learned the format, of course, I guess the EVP had actually gotten started. Richard, wasn't a fellow in Belgium who did bird watching? Yeah, bird watching or something, right?
Yeah, Constantine Raudive.
Uh-huh. And I guess Stewart had heard about him and had tried, some of these experiments. And as time went by, the responses went from one or two words to something perhaps a little bit more elaborate. Now, have you seen a pattern over the years? Is there a development in this EVP phenomena? Or are we at the same, spot we would have been half a century ago?
Well, coming at it from a skeptical point of view, as lots of people like to, we now hear the excuse that these are just stray cell phone signals or radio waves. As the electromagnetic spectrum gets busier, and that's entirely down to us, now we're adding in Wi-Fi and all these kind of technologies, I think it becomes easier to write this stuff off if you're willing to, but it ignores the fact that EVPs have been recorded in Faraday cages. Faraday cages are designed to electromagnetically shield. Yeah. So when Pi Labs did Pi used to be this big electronics manufacturer. I remember my grandfather had a Pi record player when I was a kid. They did some experiments into this, and they were recording them in Faraday cages. So I think although technology advances and we no longer use magnetic tape, we're now using hard drives with digital voice recorders, still the phenomena continues, and they're becoming, if anything, more interactive.
Now, okay, what is your perception of this? I mean, do you see it as like a group of scientists on the other side that are sitting at some heavenly desk broadcasting it to us and know exactly what they're doing, or I mean, what is your perception of what an EVP actually is?
Well, I think it's a dangerous assumption to assume that we're communicating with the dead at all. One possibility is that we could perhaps be communicating with people just like us in other dimensions, other planes of being.
The Paul Eno theory.
I'm not familiar with Paul. No.
Yeah, he has a show Beyond the Paranormal, and he's a regular guest on the show here. But that's one of his theories too. I guess a more serious parapsychologist would take that leaning towards an explanation rather than saying, "Oh, they're just spirits wanting to say hello."
Well, I think that the two ideas aren't mutually exclusive, are they? And right now the jury is still out, I think. We know that they're discarnate voices. They're not physical people transmitting from a physical location here as we understand it. So they are somewhere out there. The question is, where is out there? Is it on the other side of the veil that we call death? Is it in another dimension, another plane of being that we don't understand? And that's still, I think, no one can say with absolute confidence.
Well, Nikola Tesla was receiving voice transmissions over his radio receivers back at a time when he was the only one who had radio transmitters and receivers. So, I think it's you can't really say that all EVPs are caused just by, stray radio signals.
You can't say that, but it's very convenient for a certain type of mindset to just dismiss them in that way.
No matter what kind of evidence I think that anybody will come up with, there are always going to be the disbelievers who will come up with explanations that I think are a lot more convoluted than the simplest explanations that you're actually picking up something out of the ordinary.
Absolutely, and I think
have we gotten? I'm sorry. Have we gotten any spirits who have actually continued conversations and told us a story like Patience Worth or something like that? I mean, are there actual lengthy conversations going on, or are they all just one sentence or two sentences or something?
They're more sound bites, but Cami can tell you about an EVP that was received that was very, very clear indeed, containing the actual name of an employee at the old hospital, which they were able to track down this gentleman's family, right, Cami?
Yes, we were. And in fact, we've been able to talk with him several times after and have an intelligent conversation with him. At one point, we asked him if he was stuck here, and he replied no. And in the same conversation, we asked also if he was with anybody, and he said he was with his mom and dad.
That's interesting.
Okay, so now is there any uniformity as far as a message that they're trying to send, or is everybody just kind of playing their own ball game here?
I think there are just as many stories as there are spirits there. And they probably all have their own agenda and their own reason for being there. But we have had some that have been able to communicate with their family members who had passed. And it's been really interesting and provided some closure.
And okay, well, Richard, how about now? Some people claim that they've even gone beyond the tape recorder phase of this. There's a fellow, I don't know if you know him, Mark Macy.
Yes, he lives in Boulder, Colorado.
Yeah, I was just going to say, yeah, we did have him many years ago. We had a conference in Colorado Springs, I believe, and he was one of the figures. Now, just for the listeners who may not be familiar with his work, I believe it's ITC. Is that what he calls his group?
Yeah,
yes.
He wrote a book called Miracles in the Storm, which was very interesting.
Yes, I actually I bought a few dozen copies to sell because I found it pretty fascinating myself. But now he claims that there are voices that are coming through over TV sets, images as well. Some, I guess, over computer systems. What other types of, we'll call them EVPs, even though I guess that would not be the actual they must all have their own definition. What are some of the things that you have you heard of anything along this line or seen any evidence of this, visions on TV and so forth?
I haven't seen anything along those lines, but recently in February I moved into an old witches prison in the UK called the Cage. It was used to imprison those accused of witchcraft during our equivalent of the Salem witch trials in the 1580s. And my laptop, which has before and since behaved perfectly well, began to go haywire. Something was scrolling through the Microsoft Word file I was using to keep a log of events, going backwards and forwards, moving the cursor around. We have that on video. It was a very unique thing to see.
So you would say then that these spirits, for lack of a better terminology, they have some effect on electrical appliances and gadgets and gizmos and so forth.
Yeah, and it was a surprisingly refined effect as well. It takes a great deal of control to do that to a computer's operating system. But there are numerous instances of people getting messages from the dead on their computers. George Nuri wrote a very interesting book about that. I think with Rosemary Ellen Guiley. about phone calls from the dead, and he also
Oh,
included
yes.
information about computers too. So as long as we've had electronic communications devices, there have been those paranormal stories to go along with them, and I think that will never change.
Yeah, I remember this actress, Gazelle McKenzie, I think it was, long before our time. I did an interview with her for the Inquirer, and she and her, I guess her mother, were living in a hotel, I don't know, Manhattan or L.A. or somewhere, and she received a telephone call, and it was a telephone call from her grandmother. And the grandmother didn't really have too much to say, but she said, "I'm, like something to the effect, I'm okay. I'll see you, soon, and take care of yourself and your mother, and so forth and so on." Well, they're pretty much a one-sided conversation. When the conversation was finished, got disconnected, it went through the telephone operator in the hotel. They found out the next day from a telegram that the grandmother had died. Well, it turned out that the grandmother had passed pretty much precisely at the moment the telephone had rung, and she had a conversation with Gazelle McKenzie. And the odd thing is when they tried to check with the hotel operator, the hotel insisted that there was not a call. There was no call that came in from the outside. So somehow the grandmother actually was able to speak over the telephone without using the Bell or AT&T apparatus. So they do seem to be able to manipulate some of our electrical gadgets. And we'll be back for our last segment.
Now back to exploring the bizarre with two of the most electrifying researchers in the paranormal, your hosts, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Oh boy, there goes that lightning right through right through the bolt in my neck. Well, we are on the last leg. I may be on my last leg, all right. We are on the last leg of the show. Our guest this evening, Richard Estep and Cami Anderson, and we have been talking about this exciting new book, The Haunting of Asylum 49. And I'm big on subheads because Tim, you and I we got 239 books we've published, and I always think a good subhead sells. And this book, The Haunting of Asylum 49, has a great subhead: chilling tales of aggressive spirits, phantom doctors, and the secret of room 666. Now, if I was browsing through Barnes & Noble, which may be the only bookstore that you can browse through these days, although the Strand in New York is, I think, may do sell more books than Barnes & Noble. That's the place that's got 3 or 4 floors of books. If I was browsing for a book on the paranormal, on ghostly phenomena, I would pick this because of the chilling tales of aggressive spirits, phantom doctors, and the secret of room 666. I found out with our books on UFOs, Tim, if we threw in an aggressive alien or two, we would sell a couple of extra copies here and there.
That's right. Hellbound UFOs.
Anyway, during our little break, Tim, you mentioned a very unusual case that you were called in on that involved a coffee pot and an EVP.
Well, yeah, you were talking about with Richard about EVPs, and when I was an editor for Mysteries magazine, I was working on an article about EVP, and I got into communications with this lady, and I think she lived in Florida, but she had gotten a new coffee pot. And she swore that as this coffee pot would percolate, and make the coffee, that amongst like the hissing and steaming and the the blurps and bloops of the coffee being made, she was hearing voices. In that, and she actually made a number of recordings. and and sent me a few of them. And boy, I tell you something. I mean, we've all heard EVPs on tape recorders and stuff, and how the different ways that these voices rise and fall on these recordings, and that's exactly the way that these voices were sounding coming out of this white noise of the coffee makers. And I mean, there have been people who have used, say, like running water.
I guess I guess you can say they're pretty perky spirits.
I was just waiting for that.
I get a raise again.
There you go. There you go. But people have used, like white noise from like running water with a faucet, or they'll turn the shower on and, ask questions, and, they'll get responses, that'll rise and fall out of the white noise, coming from this. So, I mean, a coffee maker producing EVP, that's no more different than some of the other methods that people have used over the years.
No, I get, well, I remember when I was running the New York School of Occult Arts and Sciences, and we were hiring psychics. We had a number of restaurants who would put in psychics different days of the week to attract customers, and people wanted to come in and get their palms read and so forth. And most of the people came in and they did, maybe automatic writing or a little bit of psychometry. But there were some people that had their own unique way of telling fortunes. One gal would take a dripping candle and put it, drip the wax into a glass of water. And lo and behold, she would do a fairly accurate reading with the candle wax. So, I mean, again, your device isn't well. Now, Richard, we were talking about this group in England, the Skull group that actually recorded, even on tape, what appeared to be visions and images from other places. And you said there that it wasn't so much the devices, but that you needed someone who was actually acting as a very heavy conductor, a human being, not just a medium of some sort.
I think what the Skull experiment kind of proved was that the technology on its own is not enough to get really impressive results. You also need the human element. You need a human conduit, a medium, to act as a facilitator, if you will. So I think that neither approach on its own, the purely mediumistic or the purely technological, can really deliver spectacular results most of the time. You need a fusion of the two.
Now, Cami, do you ever use psychics or mediums in trying to contact those on the other side in your asylum?
We don't always use them as, say, a tool, but we do have mediums that come through and that are tour guides also. We have one named Misty, and she is a very good and gifted medium. So she is one that is able to communicate and kind of help direct our line of questioning and kind of point us in the right direction.
Now, you did mention, in fact, I guess Tim was going to ask you about this, UFO-related alien experiences?
Yes, he was. We were actually just discussing how we've had different experiences with aliens and how we're close to Dugway out here. And I mentioned that we had seen something, or Richard did, excuse me. And the story of that goes, me and a friend of mine, Kathy, was sitting in the conference room, which is now called the chapel. And we looked in the doorway and saw a very tall being that looked white or gray duck down in the doorway. And he was very odd. He had pretty much a human, kind of the human shape, but his arms were very long, went down to about mid-calf. That's about how long it would be on us. And his body was quite a bit shorter than ours would be. And in researching what it could be, because obviously you see something, you're going to want to research and find out what it is. I saw pictures of experiencers and people that have frequently seen aliens describe exactly that. And I thought it was
Mhm.
very curious, and maybe there's a connection with aliens or ETs and spirits.
Well, maybe they all blow through the same portal or come through the same wormhole in space, or however they get here. Perhaps they're all coming together, including Bigfoot.
Yeah.
I don't know. Have you had sightings of Bigfoot in the backyard there?
It's weird that you mentioned that, because we actually have
Funny you
this
should
year.
mention that, huh?
We've had some very
Okay.
interesting creatures this year, so it's funny that you mentioned that.
Is that right? What kind of creatures?
Well, I thought I saw something. I was going to turn on the sprinkler system at the hospital, and it was nighttime. I was all by myself, and I looked over to the chain link fence, and I saw something that was very tall and seemed very hairy, and he was in the dark, so I didn't get really good detail, but I did see that, so I don't know what it was.
Well, now Tim and I just worked on a book that was just been out for a couple of weeks, available on Amazon. Cryptid creatures from dark domains, dogmen, devil hounds, phantom canines, and real werewolves. And there seems to be a an increase in the number of cryptids that are being reported from around the country. Now, like with UFOs, you don't really know whether there are more being seen or the subject is just getting more notoriety, so it's getting more attention. It's kind of
Hmm.
a vicious cycle. You can say that about UFOs or ghosts, perhaps
Right.
is well. But we have at least part of my thinking is that there is a connection between all of these personage, individuals, entities, or what have you. In fact, coming up on the show, we're going to have our old friend Nick Redfern, who's just written a book on supernatural Loch Ness, and he's of the opinion, like I tend to be, that what goes on around the Loch Ness in Scotland may be, to a great extent, paranormal in nature, and then taking the physical side of the um, uh, sea serpent or lake the serpent phenomena will be our friend Kathy Elizabeth, who believes that they are, flesh and blood, or sea serpents, creatures. They're not paranormal at all. That if you catch one in your net, you've got them for good. Where Nessie doesn't seem to want to stick around, and have his photograph taken or anything. So even as far ranging as the sea serpent phenomena, you've got this paranormal versus physical um, debate, going on. So, Cami, is there anything new that's shown itself in the Asylum 49? Is there any kind of new phenomena that's been popping up?
There's always new things and different things that occur. Um, we speculate that we do have some passersby that come in, um, and we have people that are guests with the guests that come and visit. And so there's always something new. We always like to try new experiments and things like that as well, to try and communicate with the spirits that we have. And you can actually watch them try and learn how to use this piece of equipment to communicate with. It's really interesting.
Now, do you believe in technology? I mean, do you think that some of these ghost hunters, go around with a whole backpack full of devices to try to register spirits and ghosts? Do you think that's necessary, or?
I think it's necessary for people who aren't mediums that can't regularly hear or see things. Um, I think you also have to, like Richard said, merge the two. I think you need to be aware that we are dealing in spiritual things, so you need to have an aspect of that until science can catch up with the spiritual realm.
Well, a lot of times that I've been out looking for ghosts in a haunted area, the majority of the time, any of the electronics that I have with me refuse to work.
Yeah, and that's pretty common as well. Sometimes we've had occurrences where a battery will die completely dead that was full a minute before, and you leave a specific area or the area that you were in, and all of a sudden your battery is full again, or the equipment will just go haywire and you can't get any real responses. Or like Richard said, sometimes your computers will malfunction or somebody will just scroll through your program. So yeah, I think that they can be unreliable at times as well.
But have you had any situations where you've been using, say, like a video camera and have seen something with your eyes and are like, yes, I got this on video, and then go back and there's nothing there?
Actually, there's been several times when that happened, and there was one particular time where you could actually watch the shadow figure walking up the hallway, and you could also see it in the LCD screen on the video camera. But when we went and looked back, for whatever reason, the digital camera didn't record that image being there. However, I, and many other people had seen this.
How frustrating is
It
that?
was. It was very frustrating. I was like, this is a 60-inch TV. How can it not be on there?
It's almost like somehow they can control whether or not that they can be, videotaped or photographed or whatever. I mean, they may not be able to control whether or not, you can see them or not, but when it comes to being recorded in, whatever medium you're using, it's just like, I choose not to.
Well, that's definitely one theory. Another one could be that within the digital day and age, it just doesn't assign it a property. It's not solid enough for it to be digitized. And so it just completely removes it, especially with like your autofocus and your autocorrects and things like that. That could definitely be a factor as well.
Any camera that I use, I turn all that off. All
That's
the
a
auto,
good,
yeah, all the autofocus, like that, white balance. I do manual white balance because anytime you have any of that, the automatic stuff, and there anymore, there are a lot of cameras that they won't let you, turn those features off and do it.
Right.
And that's so frustrating.
It is very frustrating.
Yeah, because like you said, and if you go on YouTube, you see so many of these YouTube videos where they're trying to shoot something and the autofocus is just going crazy, and it's just like just stop it.
Right, they're forgetting that they're in the dark a lot of times, and so your camera and autofocus has to work extra hard to even get a picture.
Yeah, there's just, I think, and I'm sure, Richard would probably, agree with this. I mean, I think that there has become an over reliance on, the use of sexy technology.
I do agree with you completely. I think that, it's when I began in 1995, this was a fairly arcane field of endeavor, and people that did it were looked upon as kind of strange. And we've now entered the era of paranormal tourism in a major way, and it's possible to spend $20 on an EMF meter and go out there, wave it around, and call yourself a paranormal investigator.
People not realizing that that EMF reader, you could be picking up the refrigerator on the other side of the wall. Yeah.
So now, do you think, Richard, that there are some people that are like homing devices, though, that they attract us more than other people?
I do. I mean, I generally am about as psychically sensitive as a house brick. But there are people that definitely seem to be magnets for this kind of stuff. And I don't know what it is about them, what those factors are, but they are out there.
Well, we've had in the UFO arena, we've had people where, they could go out 50 nights in a row to a window area where everybody else is seeing weird things in the sky and see absolutely nothing. On the other hand, you can give people, some people a camera, and they'll come back with 3 rolls of film, or I guess in the old days it would be film. 3 rolls of film loaded with all kinds of weird things on there. There was this gal, in fact, the video's up on our YouTube channel, Mr. UFO's Secret Files. Stella Lansing, remember Stella, Tim? And
oh, sure.
New Hampshire? I guess she lived near Betty Hill. Well,
yes.
You could give this gal an 8mm camera, and she would go out and point it at the sky, and not only get UFOs, but she'd get things like clocks and people who were like visiting each other in a room. I mean, like stuff that was going on that had nothing to do with her pointing wherever she was pointing the camera at. She just had that amazing ability to touch a camera uh, and have something phenomenal appear. Just like I don't, if you remember back in the what was it, the 70s, there was a psychic in Chicago by the name of Ted Sirios.
Right.
Yeah.
Former bellhop.
Didn't he do the psychic photography?
Yes, he did. He would roll up a tube of some sort, right? He had a name for it. I can't remember.
Gizmo.
What
It was his gizmo.
Yeah, well, that's what it was. It was a roll, and he would put that on the camera lens and put it up to his forehead or look through it or whatever he did, and lo and behold, there would be all kind. When they developed the film, there was all kinds of weird images and things on there. I don't know, and of course, some people said, well, he's obviously faking it and so forth and so on, but he was investigated by some of the parapsychologists of the day who are certainly susceptible to fraud as anybody else would be, but they seem to be convinced that something truly paranormal was afoot there. But we're closing in on the last few minutes of the show. And by gosh, I want to go around the table. Richard and Cami, tell us about what you're working on and where the future lies in your studies.
Certainly. Ladies first.
Well, we are going to be working on a second haunting of Asylum 49 come October. And that's about it for me. I pretty much research Asylum right now.
Well, and what's your website that people can go and get more information about you?
You would go to asylum49.com. I also, me personally, am on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. And I also have a website under construction right now that should be up soon, camianderson.com.
And the hospital, when will it be open on season for people to go to?
We are actually opening September 16th for the haunted house attraction.
All right.
Well, that's just right around the graveyard corner.
It is.
All right, Richard, and you?
Well, I'm just finishing the manuscript for next fall's book, next Halloween's book about the witch's prison, The Cage, called The Spirits of the Cage. That's for Llewellyn. Once that's done, I'm moving into Fox Hollow Farm to investigate the haunting of the I-70 Strangler's house, a haunted serial killer's house. I could not pass that opportunity up. When that's done, I'm writing a book with my good friend, the master illusionist, Mr. Aidan Sinclair from America's Got Talent, about the art of the seance, behind the scenes on the Victorian seances, what was genuine, what perhaps wasn't.
What is the Beast of Mysore about?
That's one of my historical fantasy novels. When
novel. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when I'm not writing true life paranormal, I like to unwind by writing fiction.
My goodness, you are a busy gentleman, and we wish you continued success with your work. And Cami, we hope you have a successful season.
Thank you.
And a lot of spooks appear. And Tim, what will you be doing this coming week?
Well, as always, I am continuing my project with you. We try to put out a new book every couple of months.
Week.
It seems like it sometimes.
Well, we just did a book, Supernatural Words by Maria D'Andrea,
Right.
which tells the readers that words, ordinary speech, is more powerful than you might actually think. And that you can learn to control your words and get what you want in life by uttering the right words, basically. And so some words do have supernatural powers. And Maria, of course, is very adept at anything to do with the occult and the paranormal. And then I have assigned you the mighty task of scanning OSPI.
OSPI, that's right.
Raymond A. Palmer edition. It's only 1,250 pages.
That's all.
And I figure, well, we had the book, and we had copies printed, and the printer who did the job disappeared, vanished, with probably a dozen copies of the book. We certainly don't print a lot at a time, but there is a demand for the book, which was channeled, I guess, going back to what about 1870 by a dentist in upstate New York.
That's correct.
Yes, who used one of the first versions of a manual typewriter, and he wrote it by candlelight every morning. He would get up at about 6 a.m. and an angel would appear and dictate the book to him. So anyway, it has been a wonderful evening, and we've all been scared to death, and we look forward to Halloween. And don't forget, on September 29th, our special guest will be John talking about the alien artifact.
Right. Good night, all.
Good night.
Pleasant dreams.
You've been listening to Exploring the Bizarre with hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz. They're taking back the night by jetting non-stop across the cosmos in search of the truly bizarre and totally unexplained, with you as their co-pilot. Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. For more information on Exploring the Bizarre and hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz, check out their KCOR Digital Radio Network page. Follow their YouTube channel at MRUFO 1100. Exploring the Bizarre.